Yeah, hi everyone. I'm here from Imperial. My job is coming to speak to people like you about university kind of applications and what we offer. I hope if any of you did come to the Oxford Cambridge talk earlier that I don't repeat too much because quite a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is probably similar to my colleagues at those institutions. So apologies if you've heard some of this before, but hopefully I'll tell you some new things as well. Just as a show of hands, is everyone in here in lower sixes? Anyone here pre-A levels? A few of you. Okay, so I don't have slides, but I will do a little bit of a talk at the end on kind of choices for STEM courses. Sorry, I think I got my brief. I thought most people would be already post that stage, but we can talk about that as well. So if you are here and you haven't picked your A-level choices yet, probably what I'll say is if you want to stay at the end and we can have a talk about that. So just to go through, like I said, that's not working. That's all right. I will do that. So, like I said, some of this you may well have seen, especially if you've been in previous talks, and you may well be familiar with this already, but just to go through. So when you're thinking about university applications, obviously in the UK, whichever university you're applying to, including very competitive universities, it's all going to go through UCAS. Everybody's going to get those 5 choices. Just the 2 deadlines to be aware of is you've got your early October deadline. So if you're applying for Oxford or Cambridge and you can only apply to one of those 2, it will be that October early deadline, and that will be for all of your applications too, because it goes through as one UCAS application. So sometimes people are like, well, it's okay, I just need to do that one, and then I'll have time to do the others. It's all going to be that early deadline, and that's going to come around so quickly. If you think about how long it's been now, well, how long it is now until kind of October, we've got 8 months. If you think about what was 8 months ago, that was kind of last summer, and if you think how quickly that time has gone, that's going to be the time when that application is going to be in. So just keeping you aware of that. Also, if you're applying for kind of medicine, dentistry, veterinary courses, that early deadline too. When we're looking at the application, there's things that all universities are going to have. So every university you apply to, your application is going to consist of your qualifications that you've already done, and the ones that you're taking, so any grades you've already achieved, and the ones that you're taking. Your personal statement, and this is one of the big things that you can really affect, and we'll start talking about that as well, and your teacher reference. So wherever you're applying, those are going to be part of your application. When you're applying to competitive courses, there's some other things that are going to come in as well. There's going to be maybe admissions tests and also interviews too. So depending on where you're applying, you may want to be thinking about those, and we'll talk about those, things to be aware of, things you can do to prepare as we go along. So, thinking about that personal statement first, because that's the thing that's going to be part of every application you do, wherever you're applying for whatever course. But when we're talking about competitive courses, this is your first chance to make your impression on universities. All the rest of that application that you're putting in through UCAS, you can't really affect at this point. Well, your GCSEs you've already done, you may predict your A-level subjects, your predicted grades you can definitely affect now, so be thinking about that, and be thinking about making sure that you get those best predicted grades that you can, but your personal statement is going to be your part of the application. This is your chance to make the first impression on the admissions tutors. And I will say at competitive universities like Imperial, and I know my colleagues at Oxford and Cambridge will say the same, your personal statement is going to be read by multiple people, including people that are experts in their field. They really are going to be looking into that personal statement and using that to kind of go through the admissions process. Some of our courses, not to scare you, but we do receive, for our highest application ratio, we get 22 applications for every place that we have. So we are using everything that we have in our application to really work out who is going to make the best candidate for this course. So personal statements are really, really important. Please make the most of the opportunity, like don't waste it. Other students won't be, so make sure that you make the most of it. It's your personal statement and it's your chance to make your first impression on university admissions tutors. So that's why we're using them. Like I said, unfortunately, just because the amount of applications received, grades on their own just aren't enough for us to choose the best candidates. Also, we don't want to pick people just by grades. The best person to be in a university classroom is not necessarily the person with the highest grade. Someone could have done 6 A-levels and got all A stars in them, but actually they may not be the best person to be in that room, and that's the thing that they're going to be starting to use the personal statement for, and that our admissions tutors are trying to pick out as they go along. It gives extra information about you. The kind of UCAS form is very impersonal. This is your chance to really tell us who you are, what you're interested in, and why you're going to be that fantastic student. And hopefully, I'm going to talk about that as I go along, but the people who are going to be reading your application are the people that are going to be interviewing you, and they're likely to be the people that are going to be teaching you when you get to university. They are also academics. They have spent their whole lives studying their subject. They went to university to study it, they went on and did a PhD, and now they're academics. They spend half their time researching it and half their time teaching students. They are looking for the type of people that love their subject too. They love it, and they want people in their classrooms that are going to ask questions. They want people in their classrooms who are going to ask things that they haven't thought about before. Also, specifically from Imperial as a science-only institution, scientists work all together collaboratively. So the people who are interviewing you next year to come and study a science course, in, I don't know, 8 years' time, you might be with them at a conference, working with them as a colleague, working on a new problem. So they're looking to pick their next generation of scientists that they themselves are going to be working with. So really showing that enthusiasm is really important. And I'll go through ways to do that and kind of some helpful ideas on that too. So what do we want to see in these personal statements? The first thing is understanding of the subject. I'll talk about a little bit of kind of myths and some misconceptions you get around university admissions, and I think one of the biggest ones is ideas that we get from the US system, so from kind of film, TV and media. We hear a lot about the US college application system. Some of you might be applying to the US college application system too. In the US, it's really different. You apply to a college, and then you choose when you're there what you want to major in. And they are much looking for like you as a person, with your extracurriculars, what sports you're going to play, things like that. In the UK, it's different. You apply specifically for one academic subject, so we are looking to select students based on that academic subject. You may have heard the term supercurricular gets used, often again by Oxford and Cambridge and other institutions. What we mean by that is actually in the UK system, extracurriculars, so things completely outside of the classroom, nothing to do with your chosen academic field, are far less important for university applications. I think I've got a slide later which kind of shows like the kind of mix of the two, but really for a competitive, especially STEM university application, extracurriculars, you cannot have any extracurriculars on your personal statement at all, and that could still be a really, really strong application. You would want some supercurriculars. You need to show lots of things you've done outside of the classroom and outside of kind of your prescribed field of study in A-levels, but they need to relate back to what you want to study, and I'll talk about ways to do that as well as we go along. So your understanding of the subject is the big one. How do you prove that understanding of the subject? Well, talk about things that you've enjoyed. Because when you talk about them on your personal statement, the admissions tutor reading it can be like, oh, look, they've obviously really enjoyed inorganic chemistry this term because they've talked to us about it and told us about book club, right? So they've obviously got this understanding and they're enjoying it. This is what you can do. You don't need to explain basic concepts in your personal statement. Sometimes people will be like, oh, can I reference kind of an area of biology or a physics theory? Yep, you absolutely can. The people reading it will be from the departments that you're applying to, so don't worry about that. You don't need to kind of explain it like to a lay person or anything like that. You can talk about your areas of interest. If it's A-level level, absolutely you don't need to explain it. You can just talk about what you're interested in. We want to see that you're making the most of opportunities that you have. So this is a really important one, and I get questions a lot when I'm going around speaking to students, and they'll be like, I'm really interested in applying for aeronautical engineering, but I'm really worried because my friend's brother's cousin's next door neighbour, their uncle works at Boeing and they've spent all summer like working on planes, and I've never had the opportunity to do that, and I'm really worried that like I won't be able to get a place because people will be applying with work experience like that. And what I always say is we know that everyone has different opportunities, and it would be really unfair for us to be like, yeah, this person's better because they've done all this experience versus this person that hasn't. But we do want to see that you're making the most of any opportunities that you have had. So that can be different things for different people. So maybe that's that if your school has extracurricular clubs, that you've joined the ones that are relevant to your interest in your subject. If your school has kind of offered you opportunities to go and visit universities or go to talks, you've made the most and you've taken the opportunity to do that. Whatever it is, any opportunities that you have had, you've made the most of them, and that you can tell us about what you enjoyed. One of the big things I'm going to say as well is we sometimes see personal statements that are almost like shopping lists. And they can sometimes be the worst ones. And they can be a personal statements from people that look amazing on paper. They may be other person who's done that work experience at Boeing. Or maybe they're a medical application and they spent 3 months observing surgeries at a hospital. But if they just write, I've done work experience in these areas of hospitals, no other information, that's almost like, well, we don't score personal statements and numbers, but that would almost be a 0 score because it means nothing on paper. You have to tell us what you gain from it. Someone on the flip side who hasn't had the opportunity to do that, who says, oh, but I did have the opportunity to volunteer at my local hospital on the ward. I was handing out food, but it gave me a really good chance to speak to patients and speak to all the different members of the medical team, and I really learned how all the members of the medical team work together. I spoke to occupational therapists and physiotherapists and doctors and nurses while I was there, and I could really got an idea of how that medical team functions and what a doctor's job is, and I really think that I would make a good job as a doctor, looking at the skills that they needed when I spoke to those doctors. That's a really good personal statement. So making the most of the opportunities that you have. Skills that will help you flourish at university. So this is where we speak about those kind of supercurriculars and extracurriculars. So Maybe you played on a team sport. And you're applying again, maybe for that medicine, you're a medic and you want to be a doctor. You've done that work experience, you know that a doctor works as part of a team, no doctor's working alone, they're always working as part of a healthcare team. You're like, I've played hockey for the last 3 years, that's really good, you've got teamwork skills. Although I would say, a bit like that shopping list, just writing, I played hockey for the last 3 years, probably won't get you very far. Also, anyone that's ever played on a team sport knows that just being in a team sport doesn't actually necessarily make everybody in that team a good team player. So saying I've played hockey for the last 3 years, it's really taught me to work with lots of different types of people and to play to everybody's strengths, work out what everyone's strengths are and where my strengths fit in. And I know that will really help me as a doctor at university and when I go on to be a doctor, working in a healthcare team. Great personal statement. Self-motivated learner. So university is a lot of self-motivated learning. No one is going to come and check up where you are. If you're not in your 9 a.m. lecture, no one's going to come and check. No one's going to help you catch up if you do miss it. You need to be self-motivated, you need to be getting yourself to those lectures. Also, the lectures are only half, maybe not even half of all the things you'll need to know. The lectures give you the structure, you'll then be expected to go off and do your own learning around those. So, showing that you've got the skills to do that. Have you played an instrument? That's so self-motivated learning. You've played that instrument, you've kept up with it, and you've kept that practice. So, playing an instrument is not important to us, especially if you're applying for a chemistry degree. However, saying, I've played the violin for the last 5 years, and I'm now grade 5, and that shows my kind of dedication and self-motivated learning because I've done that and got myself practiced in my own time and gone through those grade exams. Great, kind of self-motivated learning. Your interest in the subject, and I'll talk about ways to show that on the next slide. Things down this side are things that we do like to see but are not necessarily 100% important. So what you want to do with the degree, if you know where you want to go on, if you've got an idea of your career path, tell us about that. But if you haven't, don't worry, you don't need to make it up. We don't mind. Lots of people come along to study physics because you love physics, not sure where you want to go yet, that's fine. It's absolutely okay. We have a fantastic career service, they're there to help you. What you'll bring to the university experience, so what you might want to do while you're at university, and what made you want to do this degree. Again, this is often ones that people like to start a personal statement with. It's not necessarily the most important thing, but if you know it and you have an idea about it, then please do include it if you want to. So, possible things to include, and this is when we're talking about those kind of ideas, that biggest bit of your personal statement, which is going to be your academic interest and why you want to study the subject. So, people sometimes think that some things are more impressive than others. So, people often say, well, it needs to be a physical book that I've read versus an online article. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the things are. What matters is what you gain from it. So, that can be a book. That can be journals, so journals like research articles, especially for STEM courses, these are really good things to start looking at. They can be quite inaccessible if you haven't read them yet, so anyone that doesn't know, a research journal is the way that kind of science gets published. So if you're a scientist doing research, you do your research, you write it up, it gets published in a journal. They can be quite technical, they have to list all of their kind of methods of their kind of experiments, because that's the way journals work. But you should be able to read, the abstract is kind of the intro at the beginning, they're normally quite introductory. One thing I will say if you're looking for journals to read and you're a bit unsure is one good place that we found is Twitter or X. It's a bit less good than it was at one point, but lots of researchers and scientists will tweet about their research on there. They'll tweet to a general audience, they'll often explain it, and they'll often link to their kind of where they've written up their research. So if you go and search for kind of areas you're interested in and find a researcher tweeting about it, you can then kind of read it, they should give you some explanation, and then you may well be able to have a go at reading the journal. Also, use your teachers at school. If you found a journal, you're like, I think this is something I'm interested in, but I really didn't understand what they were talking about here. Your teachers will be able to help you. That's a really good thing that you can put on your application. Newspaper articles, podcasts. Podcasts are a great one. There's lots of good science podcasts talking about kind of new areas of STEM, science, new research. You can listen to them while you're on the bus, in the car, on the way home, while you're cleaning your room, things like that. So they're really good ones to fill it up. Blogs as well. YouTube videos, again, sometimes people think these things are less good, but not all of them are good. There's lots of things on YouTube and blogs and podcasts that I wouldn't say were good scientific, but if they're coming from a scientific researcher at a university, then these can make really good things to talk about and show your interest in the subject. MOOCs, massive online courses, summer schools, work experience. I would put this one kind of almost with brackets around it. Lots of people sometimes worry that you need work experience, unless it's for a vocational course, so medicine, dentistry, veterinary, where they ask you to have work experience. You do not need work experience for a university course. These are academic courses, we don't expect you to have work experience before you come on there. So unless it says in the entry requirements, don't worry about the work experience, honestly. EPQs as well. And I have this kind of almost formula that we talk about not making your personal statement like a shopping list. So I did X, so I read a book about genetics, and I found out about, I don't know, population genetics, which made me really interested in this thing, and I then went and read another book about that, or I listened to a podcast about that. You're showing your interest, you're showing research skills, which are the things that we're going to look for in scientists at university. How am I doing for time? Sorry.
It's 4 minutes to 12. So.
Okay, cool. So next thing about competitive courses are admissions tests. So we use admissions tests again because we receive a high number of applicants. Admissions tests are normally looking to test aptitude rather than your actual academic kind of level. We're going to use A-levels to test that. We're looking at other skills. So examples include the UCAT for medicine and dentistry, the STEP or the MAT exams for maths and computing, also the TOMUA test for that. ESAT is a new test that is for engineering and mathematical subjects at both Cambridge and Imperial. That will be happening for the first time kind of this year. And the PAT test for physics at Oxford. So if you are applying for these competitive courses and you know you're kind of aiming at high-level university courses, I really recommend now that you go and have a look and see whether any admissions tests are needed. If you do need to do an admissions test, you need to let your school know now, because you can often take these at school, but your careers and your exams team will need to know about it with lots of time, because sometimes there can be deadlines. Some you need to take at kind of test centres, but you need to kind of know and get your applications in for those. So definitely go and have a look, see whether you need any admissions tests. I'll be around at the end, so if you're worried or you want to check, I should be able to help you or kind of direct you where to find that information. But just know that there are admissions tests. And finally, we have interviews. So this is the final part of the admission process for very competitive courses. So Oxford and Cambridge are going to interview for almost, I think, all of their courses. Imperial we interview for the vast majority of our courses. Our exceptions include maths and biology. Selected courses at other universities such as UCL and LSE, Warwick will use interviews for some of their courses. And if you're applying for medicine, dentistry or veterinary, you're almost certainly going to be interviewed. And some other kind of healthcare allied subjects as well, you're highly likely to be interviewed. So again, have a look, find out whether you are going to have an interview as part of your admissions process. What are we looking for when we get you to interview? So it's a bit of an extension of those things we were talking about with the personal statement, but in greater detail. So it's a chance for us to find out a bit more about your personal statement about one side of A4. It's a chance for us to find out more about the person behind that personal statement. We're looking at your reason and motivation to study. We're also starting to look at your communication skills. So depending on the subject you're applying for, this can be more or less important. If you're applying for maths, say, this can be a bit less important. It's going to be much more about your mathematics skills, your problem-solving skills. If you're applying for medicine, on the other hand, this is going to be really key. I was saying to someone earlier, a doctor is an interesting type of scientist. They are a scientist, they've studied a lot of science, but they don't find out new science in the way that other scientists does. They take the new science that the other scientists find out and they practice medicine with it. And that means that they apply it to work out what could be wrong with the patient, but they also communicate that science to a patient who may not understand it. So there's a classic interview question for medicine that says something like, there's a person in another room and you've got a phone linked to them. They've never seen a pair of shoes before. Can you explain to them how to tie their shoes? So thinking about how you communicate information to someone who's not familiar with something that you're very familiar with. So looking at those communication skills, looking at academic ability, your intellectual flexibility. What do I mean by this? This is, we know you're probably quite good academically because you're applying to a really competitive course. You've probably got predicted grades with A's and A stars. How good are you at things that you haven't seen before? So not things that you've had lots of practice doing, but how good are you at problem solving something you haven't seen? How good are you at applying what you do know and taking it and doing something you may not have done before? So this can take different forms. It may be a type of question that all the information you need to answer it would have been covered in GCSEs or A-level, but you may not have ever seen it before done in that way. And how do you cope with that? What do you do? Do you try different things or do you just freeze up and not do anything? Where do your curiosities lie? Can you take in different things you've read and go, oh, I've never heard of that before, but it does sound a bit like this book I read. Could it be that? And you have a conversation with the interviewer. We're also looking to you have a clear understanding of the course. These are difficult courses. They are very academically challenging. We want to make sure that you know that and you understand exactly what the course is, because there's nothing worse than you showing up and being like, oh, I knew it was going to be difficult, but actually we're not learning anything I thought I was going to be doing, and I don't think I like this. If you've gone all the way through this process, we want to make sure that the course is right for you. And on the same side, In interviews, mostly the university is talking to you, but the interview day, if you do get called to interviews, is also you talking to the university. You will hopefully have multiple offers and a choice of which one you want to accept. So make sure you ask the university about the course, make sure it's the right course for you. And that looks really good at the interview too, because it shows us that you really care and you're really interested and engaged. So ask them questions about the course, what you might be learning. The other thing is they are not trying to deliberately catch you out. You do hear horror stories, especially in the past, of some university interviews where people would deliberately ask trick questions. That's not what's going on at university interviews today, especially at Imperial. Like I said, they may ask you something that they don't think you've ever seen before, so they don't expect you to know how to do it straight away. However, it's not there to catch you out, it's there to see what you do and how you cope with that. So, how can you prepare for interviews? So, one thing I would say is, education in the UK, you are very prepared at written tests. That's been the whole way you've been assessed your whole way through education. You're probably quite good at it, you're probably quite good at writing down your answers and writing in a written way. When you're assessed at interview, it's a whole different set of skills. So, just like exams that you've been practicing all the way since you were really small in primary school and prep school, you can get better at them. You've got better at them. You haven't just got more knowledge, you've got better at doing them, and you can get better at your interview skills too. And this is the time to do it. You've got time between now and kind of this time next year when you may well be kind of going to interviews, or in the autumn, first kind of rounds of interviews, to get better at it. So, first of all, practice talking about yourself. There's a big thing, especially in British culture, about kind of, we don't like to kind of appear big-headed or boastful. It's not the time to worry about that in an interview. It's time to talk about yourself. Talk about all the things you've done. Don't not mention something because you think you might have talked about yourself too much. Practice doing it. Grab your friends, grab parents, whoever it is. Practice talking about yourself. Practice talking about all the things you wrote about in your personal statement. So get your personal statement and see, okay, I wrote about that summer school, I wrote about these 3 books, and I wrote about this. Practice talking about all those things. Practice doing it. You will get better at it and you will come across better at interview. You don't need to come up with anything new, you may have already known all the stuff, but you will get better at talking about it and you will remember how to do it. You're going to be nervous on your interview day. Everybody is to some extent. So the more you've practiced, the more kind of muscle memory it will be and the better you'll be at it. Practice with family and friends. So like I said, grab a friend at lunchtime, especially if you've got other friends that are applying with interviews, be like, hey, should we do this? It's horrible, it's embarrassing, but let's do some practicing. But also some more formal situations. So if your school offers you mock interviews, take them. Ask your teacher, if you're applying for a physics course, ask your physics teacher whether they mind like giving you 10 minutes at lunchtime to just do some practicing, talking about some physics questions. Your family friends that you don't know very well, practice talking to someone new and completely unfamiliar, because that's what it's going to be in real life. Practice tackling unfamiliar problems that you haven't seen before and talking them out loud. So some tips for this: if you're studying A-levels currently, go and get IB questions for the course you're applying for. So you're applying for maths, you're doing maths A-level, get some IB higher level maths questions. They should be the same, there should be many things that you haven't seen before, but they'll probably be asked in different ways. They'll be different from the past papers that you currently do. Go and look at American, like AP questions, whatever it is, get another example of questions, do some different types of questions. And practice talking out loud, not just writing it down. Because when you're in there, they may give you, say, a chemistry equation, they'll say solve this. They don't want you to silently solve it and hand it back to them. Again, we're going to test whether you can solve the chemistry equations because we're going to ask you to get an A-star in your chemistry A-level. We know you can do that. What they want to see is how you talk through your problem-solving skills. Practice doing that out loud. Really key skill for interviews. So, final slide before I kind of go over to any questions, and I'll talk to people about some subject choices as well, is what you can do right now. So, find out if you need to take an admissions test. This is my first thing. Go and find out about it. Do not rely on your schools or universities to tell you if you need to take that admissions test. You could get all the way through, you could put your UCAS application in, you could get a rejection, and it could be because you didn't do an admissions test that you needed to do for that course. So that would be a really awful situation, and we'd really hate for that to happen. So find out now if you need to do them. If you do, start preparing. All admission tests are skills that you can get better at. All skills you get better at and you get quicker at. You get better at under pressure, you'll be quicker at them, so you'll have more time to tackle the harder questions. With all admission tests, if you Google them, you'll see lots of companies offering kind of preparation courses, often for lots and lots of money. The only money that I would ever recommend spending is if you can get some practice paper books. So some tests have more than others, but especially like UCAT, there's books with loads of practice questions in them. People will sell them on second hand because once they've done them and used them, they don't need them anymore. Buy some of those, just do as many practice questions as you can. Practice, 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 you will get better. For personal statements and interviews, start to write down anything you think might be relevant. Get a notes page on your phone and just start putting stuff on it. Oh yeah, and that was a really interesting thing we did in biology today. Noted down the name of what it was so that you can read about it later. I went to a talk or I listened to a podcast or I saw a tweet, write it down, take a screenshot, save it in your notes. You've got it later to use. Ask friends, family and teachers for input. There might be things you've forgotten. They'll be like, yeah, you should really talk about like that thing you did last summer where you went to that university. And you're like, oh God, yeah, put that on your list. And then add to your list. When you've got that list together, if it's looking a bit short and you don't think you've got lots of things that you might want to talk about for university admissions, visit museums, sign up for talks, either virtual or in person, listen to podcasts and start doing some reading around your subject. Ask your teachers for some book recommendations. Lots of universities, Oxford have a whole list on their website of kind of recommended reading list. Go and have a look at that and kind of add to things to put on your list. So I think that is all of my slides. It is indeed. Thank you so much for talking. I know I've given you lots of information.